me rethink. I used to have this attitude. I never understood why these elite runners would go enter a race, and if they're having a bad race, they'd, like a 100-mile race, they'd pull out of it. I'm thinking, well, you signed up for 100 miles, so you have a bad race. What the rest of us do, we just stick it out. But then I started to think about it, and I thought, well, if they have a sponsor and they're trying to get, podium finishes because their sponsors look at that. And it used to be ultra sign-up, they didn't list DNFs. So you could have an ultra sign-up listing that looked like every race you've done, you've finished really well. But then they started adding the DNF listing, which I think is the right thing to do. If you pull out, at least there's a record that, hey, you were there and did finish it. But now I'm thinking, all right, if these guys are training really hard because they do want to get sponsorship and they're having a bad race, why should they have to stick it out and beat themselves up to finish 100 miles just to be able to satisfy guys like me that are saying, hey, why'd you drop out? That's, so I'm thinking that with myself. Like, I'm sitting here at the sidelines at 12 hours, and I had 51.6 miles, which was, I had, just probably, I don't know what my position was in the 12 hours, but I think I was maybe second or third or something. Yeah. So there's a lot of people who had a lot less miles than me. They're doing the 24, and they're probably going, well, why would you drop out? You've got so many miles. You're going to beat everybody else in the 24-hour, which the winner actually did 101, which is, you can talk about that. But second place, the first male, it was a female, first place male was 86 miles. Well, I already done 51, but it wasn't, I would rather have gotten last place 100 at that race than first place in the 24-hour and be a couple miles shy because of what it would do to me. So my point is, I've rethought why people will drop out of a race. And the other factor too is, if it's not fun, I get that now. If people are like, I'm just not having any fun, why burn yourself out?
No, why torture yourself? Well, well, it's because you kind of, there used to be the old school kind of philosophy in ultras and kind of the idea of ultras was to go out and cover the distance. You showed up, you're supposed to do the 50 mile, the 100 mile. And that was kind of the goal was just finishing the course no matter what. But you'll see, especially, obviously with the elite athletes, you really, and I say this all the time, and you'll see the elite athletes like, Mev Keflezighi, who we were talking about. I love in his book, and I used to save this photo. He posted on Instagram one time this adorable picture he took from his book, and it listed his marathons and how he did in all the marathons. And then he penciled in silver medal at the one Olympics. And so Mev Keflezighi had a 16-year marathon, 16-year marathon career. Guess how many marathons Mev Keflezighi ran in 14 years?
Well, I believe his final retirement race was New York City. I think it was his 26th marathon, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I've got one of my biggest craziness with a lot of people. And I mean, obviously you're the master of doing tons and tons of races, but most people shouldn't be doing that. And so like most elite guys run a fast one in the spring and one in the fall, and that's it. So the best guy, one of the best American marathoners ever, has plenty of sponsors. He's running 2 races a week. And the thing is, and we've talked about this.
2 races a year.
Yeah, twice a year. And also, and also the thing is, we were talking about this, is that no one, and especially sponsors or the public, really notices or cares if you drop out of a race. They just don't. All they care about, in fact, you need to watch it. Actually, it was pretty difficult to watch. HBO has a documentary with Michael Phelps, and he's kind of doing the narration, but it's about Olympic athletes and depression and what they go through, and talking about. I'd love to see that. And it's rough, actually. It's pretty rough to watch. I watched it last night, and like Michael Phelps, he was suicidal. He got DUIs. A bunch of the others are athletes, because what happens is they train for 4 years, and then they have that moment. And even when, like Michael's, like all the medals he won, you just end up feeling really hollow. But then the problem is, like they were saying, like Apollo Ono was saying, like, yeah, here's the difference between first and fourth in the speed skating race. Yeah. That's first and fourth. He goes, first might get some money. Second, nobody cares about. Third, they really don't care about. And fourth, that doesn't matter at all. except, and
doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And so when you're in a race and you're not feeling it, dropping out is the thing to do. And in fact, it was funny when I was interviewing Craig Simmons, and, you know, he's had some classic Sufferfest, and he mentioned, he goes, yeah, Andy, you're really good at like just going, I'm done and leaving, you know. And like I said, I went to the Dome and didn't even get to 100K. I was like, okay, you know, live for another day. This is just not happening. And, you know, and I had a great quote one time when I was at, I think it was when they had the rocks at across the years that one year, and I just got terrible blisters. And, you know, I talked to a good friend.
And, the gravel, the pea gravel.
Yeah, the pea gravel. And I talked to a friend who just said, you know, if you're not having any fun and your goals aren't going to be able to reach your goals, or they don't mean that much to you, why torture yourself just for the sake of self-flagellation? And also, and it goes into what we were talking about on the last podcast about worrying about what other people think. It's like, so what? I mean,
yeah. I learned that lesson. You know Eric Clifton, who Eric Clifton is?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, these are people listening to him. If some of the people are newer to ultra running scene, they may not know the name, but back in the day, Eric was, he was the cast pajamas. I mean, that guy, he held the course record at JFK for 17 years, I believe it was. And it was actually the 50-mile American road record. And he also, for close to that, like 16 years, held a 100-mile, I think, trail record. But he was notorious, kind of like Steve Prefontaine. Eric Clifton was notorious for going out super hard and strong. And then if the wheels fell off, boom, he was out. And so I had done my first Badwater, 2011. I had done that. And then 5 days later, there was a 100-mile race, Cool Moon 100 up in Northern California. And I decided I wanted to do that one because the Badwater was my 135th marathon or longer distance for a 1 year. And that was a new world record for the marathons, most marathons in a year. So I wanted to do this 100-mile race. So I went to that race and I met Eric, and my friend John Moak had done Badwater and DNF'd. And so I was talking to Eric, and I said, man, I don't really know what to say to John because I finished Badwater, had actually a good race. And I feel really bad for him, but I'm not quite sure how to handle it because I know he feels terrible about his DNF. And Eric started talking to me. He said, you know how many DNFs I have? I said, I don't know. He said, I don't either. I said, I have so many of them I can't even count them.
Yeah.
He said, and this is typical Eric, he said, DNF is he had something with DNF, but basically no fucking big deal. That was his language. Yeah. And
does not fucking matter.
I would go out, pretty much.
Does not matter.
Said, I would go out super strong, and if it wasn't happening, I'd pull out. I don't care what people thought because my records spoke for themselves. When I had a really good race, I had a tremendous race. Mm-hmm. And that's how he was. He was balls to walls at every race he did. And that was his style. And hearing that from him, you know, made me know, okay. And at that point, I had not had a DNF in 100-mile races. I'd gone like over 20 100-mile races, no DNFs. Yeah. And I always had the old school attitude that some people have, that death before DNF. That's a great, like, again, Mike Tyson, everybody has plans to get punched in the mouth. That's a great attitude to have until you have a DNF. And then you have a wake-up call from the ultra gods saying, oh, really? You think you're all that? Here, take this. Now you're like every other normal 100-mile runner who's eventually going to have a DNF if they just run enough of them, you know, and you challenge yourself enough. You could do just easy stuff if your goal is, I never want a DNF, but then you're not pushing yourself. And you know when you have a DNF, you know, and if you didn't just pull out because you just gave up, but if you know, okay, I found my limit. I kept, you know, pushing and doing harder and harder stuff. And I've had this conversation with Josh Holmes as well, that he's never had a DNF in all his hundreds, and he's probably done like 40 hundreds. But his goal race, a race that he really, really wants to do, is Barkley, because he was born and grew up in Tennessee, and he's really good friends with Laz, and he's done Ball State like 6 or 7 times. He does all Laz's races. But he said, I will not do Barkley until I have a DNF, because he said the likelihood is I'm going to DNF at Barkley. I don't want that to be my first DNF. But you know, so different people have different attitudes